Thank you. I now call to order the MWPA Executive Committee meeting of October 5th, 2023. Josh, can you please call the roll to ensure we have a quorum present?
Here.
Julie McMillan,
Here.
Rachel Kurtz,
Offline. Here.
Bruce Goins,
Present.
Dennis Rodoni.
Here.
Number 3, I will entertain requests to adjust the order of the agenda. Any requests? Number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting, mute your microphone when not reporting out. Josh, are there any public comments?
There's nobody with their hand raised.
Thank you. Number 5, Executive Officers Report. Mark Brown will now present the Executive Officers Report.
Good morning, President McMillan, everybody. Let me get my screen share going. You would think I would have this dialed in by now, but sometimes we get distracted. Yeah, just quick fire season update. As we've been discussing, it's been a mild fire season this year. However, we should not drop our guard. As I promised at our our last board meeting, we are in the fall weather pattern, which means that we have a low pressure system come through that may or may not bring precipitation. And it will be followed by an offshore wind event that may or may not be strong. So we had a low pressure system come in this weekend that did give us some precipitation. And now we are experiencing that offshore event that is mild. Based on the rain that we did receive, based on the strength of the wind, we are not in red flags at this time, but this is the weather pattern that we will be experiencing until we get a season-ending rain event. Fire activity has been remarkably low. I just looked at our fuel moistures and as expected, that rain event actually did very little for the 100-hour fuels. The 10-hour fuels responded quite a bit to it, but the 100-hour fuels are now trending below average right now. So just shows you the difference between the 10 and the 100-hour fuels and how they interact. Did want to let you know that we were invited to present to another committee of the Assembly. It's a joint committee of the Insurance Committee and the Wildfire Committee. The hearing will be Monday coming up at 1 o'clock. And I know unfortunately, it's not on the Assembly hearing schedule right now. So I'm not 100% sure who's presenting. I just know that myself and Amy Bach from United Policyholders will be there. Speaking of Amy, myself, and Gene Bonander were requested to speak at the Marin Coalition yesterday to talk about the insurance challenges that's going on in California. Well-attended crowd with a lot of good questions and concern. And we had 3 of our board members there. Julie, Rachel, and Gabe were all there in attendance. Like I said, some really good questions and obvious concern about insurance. And like we thought would happen, people, when Maui occurred, a lot of focus was on Maui. But we figured once the Maui concerns went away, the insurance concerns would come back up, and that is what happened. Top right on the screen, you'll see the cover page of the Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission report. That's actually a commission that we tried to get Bruce onto a couple of years ago, but unfortunately, Bruce was not selected. And I'm in the process of reading it and plan on giving you guys a written executive summary of it. But just this morning, I found out that Bob Roper, who is the retired fire chief of Ventura County and is a friend of Marin County and is also on the Western Fire Chiefs board, was a member of this commission and has offered to come to the MWPA and present on this item. So Bob Roper is a nationally recognized individual, especially in the wildfire space. And he did mention that the MWPA was mentioned a lot during the research of this report, and that they see us as a model to follow. So I've reached out to Bob, asked him to contact me, or I'll contact him, and we'll follow up and figure out when we can get him on, when he can appear to the board and give a presentation on this report. I'm pretty excited about that. Citizens Oversight Committee, as you see, has completed their report. They approved it at their last meeting. I'm in the process of reviewing it. The plan is I'll prepare a staff report for the executive committee for next month and then bring to the full board in November. Tell you right now, no surprises in it. Finance Committee, we will be meeting Wednesday of next week at 10 o'clock. The two main items are the closeout of fiscal year 22-23 and what funds that we will roll over to 23-24. I will say that it was a very productive year. And I'll just leave it at that. And we're still ironing out some of the dollars and cents, but a very productive year. And the second agenda item will be the audit that we received from our auditor, and the short story of that is it was a very clean audit. Most of you probably saw the notices of some burning that was going on in Novato in the H Ranch area. Mostly for it's an initial attack firing class. I know, Bruce, you got to go up there on Monday I believe, or Tuesday. It's primarily for initial attack firing or fighting fire with fire. Some resource benefit to it, especially the plots they were planning on burning today has a brush component in it that would be good to transition from the brush to the grass. But the benefit we have as far as resource benefit is that we are training more individuals in the art of using fire. And so that increases the number of people that we'll have available for prescribed fire. Next week, somewhere between October 10th and October 12th, that project that we had in Rock Springs that we were unable to burn last year because the atmospheric rivers decided we weren't going to do it. We have it on the schedule to burn between 10th, 11th, 12th, depending on weather conditions and approval for Bay Area Air Quality Management. I'm hoping that it works out with the schedules that I can get the whole MWPA team up there because it's a really easily accessible site. It's paved road. It's a Rock Springs parking lot. And the difference between this prescribed fire and the majority of the prescribed fire that we have been doing for the last 10, 15 years and what we were burning up in Novato is it's in heavy fuels. It's not a grass prescribed fire, which is what a lot of our prescribed fire has been lately. This one will actually have a tremendous resource benefit. It's a 20 to 30 acre plot, depending on how they shape it. It's a very safe burn and it's going to put smoke in the air. The burning in Novato put smoke in the air. So we're going to get our residents used to seeing smoke in the air that is our smoke and help get them used to it and not be afraid of it. And finally, you notice that Josh is sitting by my side. That's because we brought him back as our grant specialist. So welcome back to Josh. And in the audience, we have our two new vegetation management specialists, Ted Briggs and Jacob Dadman. We're going to keep the introductions really short today, and we'll have a full on stage. You guys get to tell the board members what you're about at the board meeting. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and take any questions.
Questions, board members? I have two questions. I'm wondering how we can access the report that you referenced.
I'll send you a link.
Okay, awesome. And then I believe Stephen Quarles is doing that mulch burn study.
Well, thank you for asking.
week.
Yes. So Stephen Quarles is great, right? The level of research that he does and the scientific approach that he takes through some funding through the Central Marin Zone that he has created mulch plots at the San Geronimo Valley Golf Course, i.e. Marin County Fire Headquarters too. And we've been allowing the mulch to dry as if it has been in a yard for a significant amount of time. And now on the 10th, 11th, and 12th, in that same window as the prescribed fire up at Rock Springs, they're going to burn that mulch and study it. So that now that we actually have scientific research for the mulch recommendations that we make along with Fire Safe Marin.
Great. Thank you. All right. Oh, yes, Bruce.
Yeah, Mark, I was up at H Ranch on Monday. I was up there for 5 hours and it was spectacular. There were over 300 firefighters up there, just well planned, well executed. And I was struck by how well constructed this project is, how bold it is, and how that they're in effect, reintroducing fire back onto a landscape that burned in 1923, the fire that started off of 101 through Novato. But my question is, what do you think of getting the incident commander or someone from County Fire to come in and give us a presentation on that, tell them what we're doing, kind of open our eyes as to what the next generation of prescribed fire might be here in Marin?
Be happy to. I will reach out to Chris Martinelli, Deputy Fire Chief. I think he was the lead on that because he is one of the cadre members for CAL FIRE's firing cadre. So I believe he's the one that coordinated. You probably saw CAL FIRE up there with Sonoma Lake, Napa, and Mendocino as well. So I'll ask Chris if he can come.
That has nice synergies with the forest health study too.
Yes,
And maybe he could provide some history.
you bet.
Great, thank you. I will now take public comment on this item. Josh?
We have no raised hands. If you're joining by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself.
I will now bring this item back to the committee for any final discussion. Yes, Catherine.
Just congratulations on all you're doing, especially being asked to appear before a joint committee of the Assembly and other really important commissions. It's really shows our work is being seen by others. Thank you.
And I've come to a new realization when it comes to sharing the MWPA story. We felt an obligation to share it just because we felt like it was the right thing to do. Now I'm realizing that there's actually a tremendous benefit for the residents of Marin for us to continue to share the story, and that is connected with the insurance challenge. The insurance industry is not going to be interested to continue to invest in California unless many more counties start stepping up at the pace and scale at which we are producing. So it actually benefits the residents of Marin if we help other counties get to the pace and scale that we're operating at. That will likely increase the chances of continuing insurance in California.
Thank you for appearing before Southern Marin Fire District Board. It was an excellent presentation and generated a lot of discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Number 6, consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. In the alternative, well, there's only one item. So any public comment on the consent calendar?
If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand. We have no raised hands.
All right. Would any committee member like to pull the item from the consent calendar? Then could we please have a motion?
I'll make a motion to move the consent.
Second.
Rachel made the motion, Bruce seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Number 7, action items. Evacuation, ingress, egress, risk assessment. Mark Brown and Tammy Lavesso with Sonoma Technology will present this report.
And we have Charlotte as well to help us with this as always. I have to say I'm excited about this. It was a huge project. This is a project that was envisioned before the MWPA was actually approved by the voters and for Measure C. So it's a long time in coming. A little background on why we did this. We knew that we wanted to be driven by science. We know that our subject matter experts, when it came to wildfire science, had a good idea what routes we should work on, which routes were dangerous, which routes were not. However, sometimes the members of the public and also our partners need to see scientific data as well, supporting what our subject matter experts are saying, what we should and should not do. And one of the things that we've noticed is that it did validate what our subject matter experts were doing in our work. And we'll show a couple of examples. The Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break was perfectly positioned based on the science that we got out of this project. But we also found where we could have done a little bit better with our project plan. And Muir Beach would be an example where we had a project along Highway 1. The report supported that work, but it actually showed that we maybe should have gone a little bit more mileage wise along Highway 1. So now we're going to be able to use this data to modify that project. We do have to say that this project did morph a little bit as we went through it. We weren't 100% sure what we were asking for when we started, since nobody had ever done this. So as we worked through this, we were able to morph the project to fit exactly what we needed to be. One of the things that we had built in was a pause prior to building an application that where we can go in and tune up, tune down the work that we're doing. We purposely built in a pause, not knowing if we wanted to build that application. So we are at that pause point right now. And I do have to say that this project has exceeded our expectations. I had high expectations to begin with. It has exceeded that. That's in large part due to the excellent team that we had with Sonoma Technology, Spatial Informatics Group, Fear and Peers, UC Berkeley. Those were all the partners within this project. And then I do want to give a shout out to our technical advisory team where it was a multidisciplinary and multi-agency team ranging from DPWs, traffic consultants or TAM, Transportation Authority of Marin, community development agencies, law enforcement, and fire experts were all part of this TAT. And it was some of the most robust, open, and honest debate at times about how to work on this project. And the feedback really made this product what it is. And we would like to mention that STI was able to perform the work on time and on budget. We would have brought this to you a little bit ago, but the TAT spent so much time well spent digging into this before we wrapped it up for you. And with no further ado, I'll pass it off to Tammy.
Okay, great. Do you guys see me or?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'll fix that.
I'm here.
Okay, you can start. We hear you, Tammy. Go ahead and share your turn your camera on now. There.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
And I will share my screen. I have a few slides here. Okay. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so I guess, the reason we're here today is to report out on the final report and the GIS tool that we've developed as part of the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment study tool. And just to remind folks, the goal of the project was to really dive into the literature, understand, the current science of what was happening with evacuation and risk factors that contributed to the fatalities, but also, people's perception of when do we evacuate, when do we not, and so we did a lot of work related to that. And the study is not intended to help, manage a real-time evacuation. It's really just for planning purposes. So just as a reminder, we started out with a literature review, which we learned a lot about the current state of science, identification of evacuation risk factors. We also did a very comprehensive data review where we looked at all of the data that was available for Marin County, and there's tons of data, which is good. And then we did some modeling for 5 test areas, and we took the findings from the modeling and expanded it to the county. And we developed these aggregate evacuation difficulty data layers and risk scores, basically. So what we found is the data basically fell into 3 buckets. So there's fire and fuels management, roadway and infrastructure management, and communication and outreach. And then around those, we developed some mitigation actions and toolkit suggestions. And we did this working with Fear and Peers, UC Berkeley, and the whole team. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but the way that we actually developed the aggregate risk factors was we looked at each risk factor data layer. We ranked them in terms of their relative importance, essentially. And then we did a GIS suitability analysis, and we came up with these aggregate risk scores. So for each risk factor, we ranked them from 1 to 5. We compiled them, as I mentioned earlier, and then we came up with what we call fixed risk factors and what we call variable risk factors. So the fixed risk factors are things that are really difficult to change, right? So you can't really change topography, you can't change slope of the road, you can't change the, complexity of roadways. But what you can do, is look at the people that live in those areas. What are their demographics? What are their socioeconomic situations? How can you reach them? Are they, female, males? And we learned a lot about the demographics and socioeconomics through the literature review. And we carried that through the project. So we came up with 3 risk layers: fire and environmental, fire and fuels, which is, our risk factors that fire and environmental agencies can use. So we looked at, safe locations, key infrastructure, rate of spread, flame length. And then we also took into account, structure density, WUI indicators, wildfire history, burn probability. And we calculated difficulty scores in each of these areas. So this is just showing, and we built a GIS tool that can allow you to go in and actually zoom in and look at the fire and fuels difficulty score. That's comprised of 11 risk factor data layers. Then we looked at, so you sort of have your fire and fuels data set, but then you also have other things like traffic and law enforcement, near road flame length, high collision roadways, evacuation route intersections, and so forth. And so we compartmentalize those separately, right? Because these are different agencies that would actually be able to do something about the mitigation. So on the roadway and infrastructure difficulty score, we actually came up with a composite score based on the 14 risk factors that I just showed for every roadway in the county, or every major evacuation roadway in the county. And the tool that we developed allows you to drill in and actually look at, what are the risk factors that are contributing to the difficulty in those areas. And we're now thinking about ways to calculate, across the county or by jurisdiction, how many of these roadways are, high difficulty, and what can be done to mitigate those. For the communication and emergency agencies, we looked at variables like cellular voice data region, alert marine subscriptions, commuting non-driving students, linguistic isolation. And this was all really based on the literature review that we did and looking at the different demographic and population groups that either don't perceive a risk, don't receive, notifications very timely, and so forth. And so we, again, developed a composite communication difficulty score. And then in addition to the work that we did on the GIS and the whole study, we also had, we looked at contextual information and data layers. So where are the approved fuels treatment projects, all the MWPA, either planned or active projects? residential roads, SB 99 indicators. So SB 99 is a Senate bill that requires counties, local jurisdictions to identify areas where you only have one roadway in and out of a housing development that's, you know, more than 30 parcels. We looked at land ownership, we looked at the zone haven evacuation routes, and we tried to put everything in context of that. We also looked at high density housing, apartments, hotels, motels, hostels. And one of the things that we learned from the literature review was that managers of these high density housing developments can be really effective at communicating, you know, evacuation information. And so from all of this, we developed a GeoHub GIS tool, which allows you to zoom in and look at all of the data. And I think Brian, who's on the line, is going to actually zoom in and show an area that, Mark, you were particularly interested in. So
Thanks, Tammy. And I just moved Brian over as a panelist.
okay, great. Thanks.
But we'll need you to stop sharing your screen so Brian can share his.
Yes, hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We got you, Brian.
Okay, great. So per discussions with Mark, we pulled out a map within the GeoHub mapping tool of a specific location. Sorry, I'm talking and trying to hit a button at the same time here to share my screen. There we go. Of a specific location of the Greater Nevada fuel break around the Butterfield Road area and San Francisco Boulevard, both offshoots of Sir Francis Drake. And underneath this layer is the flame length risk layer that goes into the fire and fuels risk category. So I know, Mark, this was an area that you wanted, or map that you wanted to use, I think, for discussion or example. So I will open it back up to you for discussion.
Great, thank you. And for clarification, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, and you'll see that we know that the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break was planned prior to the data coming from this report. But when you look at these colors, yellow being the lowest fire severity to the bluish purple to being the higher severity, you can see that the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break actually hits a lot of the areas between the wildland urban interface where the greatest flame lengths were. So it validated the work that our guys and gals had planned. And even I don't know why that this one little funny little finger that it was that's right in the middle of the screen. You see the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break goes out, and then you see this little finger of treatment go right up from there. They planned that on their own without seeing this data, and that happens to overlay one of the areas that is identified by this study. So it really did validate the subject matter expertise of our people, but it's also helping us to improve the work that we started.
And prioritize, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll add a few notes if it's okay. Thank you, Tammy and Brian, very much for your collaboration on this tool, and Samantha as well. Sorry. It's been really great working with you on this, and we're not done. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We have the current condition tool, and we've gotten very positive feedback from the stakeholders and the agencies. I think it's always a great sign when a project like that comes out and the agencies are banging at your door asking you when they can log in and when they can start using it. So it shows that there's a real practical application and a need for this. I wanted to clarify very briefly that this is, in a way, a gathering of many different GIS layers, but it's a lot more than that. It's actually a modeling tool where fire risk feeds into traffic risk and communication risk, and traffic risk feeds into communication risk feeds into traffic risk, right? So this is because of the sequence of event, right? There's no alert before the fire is detected, and the traffic only starts once people get the notice that there's an incident and start moving to the road. So we have to keep that in mind as we visualize the tool. It's not just, swap this layer for that layer. There's a whole machine behind this that computes and weighs and models these layers together so that they make sense when we're just looking at them as a heat map. The other thing I wanted to really make clear, I think Tammy has said that at the beginning, but this is not an incident management tool. This is strictly ahead of disaster, ahead of the incident. What can we do to lower the risk if and when this segment of road or this area of the county has to be evacuated? So I want to make that clear, because it does impact the way we use the tool. It also impacts the way some of the data is displayed, right? For example, Tammy mentioned that the tool maps the risk for every segment of road in the county. You can click on that link and you get a score of 1 to 5. How risky is that road? And then you can dive into it and say, okay, it's a 5 because of this, this, and that factor. And some of them are fixed and some of them are variable. But the point is that it's static in the sense that it's segment by segment, right? We're not looking for something that is going to be cumulative like you would need if you're managing the incident, since it's a planning tool. I think I'm sure there's a lot more to say, and I know this is a lot of information, so thank you for your patience as you hear us out on this tool. But for now, I'll pass it back to Mark.
Yeah, and I have a few items to discuss with you before we get to questions. And one of them is I want to talk about how we're going to use this. I think I've mentioned on the fire aspect of it, we can dig into the flame lengths, we can dig into the rates of spread, and that can help design our projects. And we're getting a little bit more bang for our buck than we anticipated for this too, because we were anticipating evacuation risk, but we're actually finding that we are using this tool for designing shaded fuel breaks along our WUI boundaries. We've already manipulated the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break based on the data that we found. And West Marin is already digging into it, because one of their projects for this current fiscal year is to create a network of fuel reduction zones around the communities in West Marin. And we've already presented this to those agencies out in West Marin, knowing it hadn't been approved yet, but there was still tremendous data in here to take advantage of. And so they're already digging into that. With our law enforcement partners, they're going to be able to dig into this, see where there's traffic issues, perhaps see where they can have officers take control in an intersection where we might want to do contraflow, where we may want to line up all the lights to go green on westbound Sir Francis Drake, for example. For OEM, it's helping us identify where we have gaps in our notification systems. And we've already met with OEM. They're excited about being able to use the tool. And one way that I see using this is seeing where we have cellular gaps and knowing that those communities might be areas that we want to focus NOAA weather radios on. And then OEM will know, well, if we have a wildfire in that particular area, we need to also notify the NOAA radios. So that's an early project that we anticipate coming out of this. DPW and transportation will be able to get traffic data. Perhaps they can do parking boxes. San Rafael is already starting to emulate Mill Valley with their parking boxes that makes sure that the roadway is clear even when cars are parked. Or maybe they could do what Mill Valley has also adopted in changing parking requirements during red flag warnings. So that's one example for how they can use it. And then community development agencies need the data on SB 99, which requires us to identify the roadways that are one way in, one way out for, I believe it's 15 or more residences. And then there's AB 747, which requires that we identify our primary and secondary evacuation routes. This product has done that. And then we're partnering with County Fire to put shape files around the SB 99 communities rather than, this product shows the roadways. Well, we're working on with County Fire that there'll actually be a shape file around a community that meets the SB 99 requirements. And then finally, I'm going to steal something that Director Hilliard said at the Southern Marin Fire meeting. One of her concerns was that, I'm not sure it was your concern, but that some people were concerned that we're endeavoring on this product for this, endeavoring on science for the sake of science. But we are using the science to guide our decision making. We didn't do this just for the sake of science. So thank you for that observation. And the big policy decision that you guys need to make besides accepting the study is what level of transparency with the public. We have been very thoughtful about how we share this data with the public. And we thought that we might be on the conservative side of sharing that data because of the fear that would create fear, panic, or that people might think that their property values would be decreased because of the study, that their insurance would be dropped because of the study. But then if you look at the past decade of this type of information being shared, it really has stopped generating that type of fears. I think you all remember the first time we started designating communities as WUI communities, there was outcries. There was people that were worried that we have dropped their property values, made them at risk for non-renewals of insurance. But lately, when we've been sharing that type of data, we've had our parcel level risk assessment online for 3 years. We have not heard one person complain about that. The new CAL FIRE fire hazard severity maps were issued. Not one mention of concern. So we feel that the threat of not being transparent is less than the threat than people complaining about that, or the greater. So our recommendation is that we do share this, make these layers available to the public with some minor alterations. And I'll mention one of the alterations is that since this is an ingress and egress risk assessment, fire roads are listed or displayed on our graphical product. Well, that's where the ingress for fire engines to suppress the fire. So we will display fire roads differently on the public facing map so that people do not consider those roads as routes of egress. Other than that, we feel that the data is appropriate to consume in the public. We'll create an executive summary of the product that is designed for the public and with some context for what they're looking at. So that's one decision for you guys to make. And the next decision is that whether or not we continue with the application. And at this point, staff recommends continuing to hold off on the creation of that application. What we found through this process is that firefighters or our pre-fire engineers really are not at that high level of technical planning. And it's a tremendous expertise to use this product. What we recommend is keeping the budget available to make that application, but use it to fund STI's consultation with our member agencies so they can sit down with STI and say, hey, this is a project we're thinking of looking at. And when you see the product, you're going to see the massive amount of data that's in there. There's even more data that's behind it, and it would just be unreasonable to display it all. But with asking the right questions with STI, and STI can help us ask the right questions, they can dig deeper into the data that's providing the data that's in this. And our folks will be able to start making better plans. And then finally, I'll mention that we are looking at a phase 2 of this project, and that is a little bit of what I call if this, then that modeling, traffic modeling. And Mill Valley had the benefit of doing this with Google, but they were able to model the traffic. If we do contraflow on Blythedale, this is what the timing is going to look like. If on Hamilton, where their station 7 is, it technically doesn't allow you to go to the freeway through there. But if they open that up, they found that there was a 20-minute decrease in evacuation times for Mill Valley. So that's part of their evacuation plan now. So phase 2 of this will be a little bit of if this and that for all of the jurisdiction. We're looking at partnering with Marin Water and the county in a NOAA grant to help fund that type of research. We have a contractor that we think will do an excellent job. STI has already been chatting with them, but also Zonehaven has been wanting to have a little bit of if this, then that modeling in their product. They have not been able to develop it themselves. So the same company that we have STI talking to, they're talking to, and it may become part of the Zonehaven project. One of the reasons why we're partnering with the county on this is sea level rise. And sea level rise does have an impact on our evacuation routes. And so that plays into the if this, then that modeling. And so that's how we made that connection through NOAA, because it has to do with community resiliency around sea rise and water resources. And so I think I've given you guys a ton of information, and I'm open for questions.
Rachel.
Oh, I love having the report. I was going back and thinking about when we went through the approval of this, and the discussion we had and how, really thorough that conversation was, but how important we decided that we know there's a lot of in-county historical knowledge, and some of this, like to say cell phone coverage isn't great in West Marin. Well, yeah, we all know that. But I think as we go forward, new people coming into this work, it's really helpful to have this and how that information plays into all the other pieces. So I'm really, really happy that we went forward with this project. Couple of questions around what is the update schedule? So as work is being done, I mean, this isn't obviously something that gets updated yearly, I would think, but I don't know what the frequency would be. So that would be one question. I'll just give you all my different questions. We've used the term tool a number of different ways and phases a number of different ways. And I went back and I'm looking on the website that this thing we need some updating to as what we know now in terms of updating that piece. I wasn't quite sure what's really happening in phase 2. And if that is, with the budget we've already set around that phase 2, even though we're not going to have it to be one-on-one to be able to use it, but we're going to be working with STI to do the same type of work. Is the tool already built for that? Or are we building the tool? So I wasn't quite sure. As far as communication, I agree. I think it needs to be at a very, very high level, and with the emphasis around the pre-planning of this. It's all about pre-planning and not probably real time. When you talk about Zone Haven and first responders, that is, I understand, a real-time tool, but if they're able to integrate some of this work into that. So I think as far as communication, we need to make sure people understand. And as we've learned, through a lot of this work, going from point A to point B outside of an evacuation, sometimes the traffic's slow. During an evacuation, it's going to be incredibly slow, and that's expected. So I think that just making sure that those expectations are set. I think that's it that I have right now.
So in regard to updating the product, if we had gone with the process of creating the app, it would have been a dynamic tool. And so every time we went in there and did planning and completed a project, and the online tool would automatically be updated. So since we are recommending not to go that route, then we'll negotiate with STI on the frequency of the updates. The tool is ready for that, though. The online tool simply is displaying the data that is entered in there, and then we have the ability to change that data based on the work that we have conducted. In fact, like you've noted, some of the work has already been done that is not representative on the GIS product yet. In regard to pre-planning and its connection with Zone Haven, I didn't say this, but Zone Haven is one of the partners of the project, but they're an unpaid partner, and their whole anticipation was to be able to take the data from this and put it into Zone Haven, so it is available for our emergency, for the use during an emergency, but also Zone Haven has a training and pre-planning tool built into it, so that data will be available through it as well. And then finally, I think you were talking about background traffic. It really is what you're talking about. And that's where Fear and Peers and with the traffic demand model and UC Berkeley. And that's why you see that when we did the modeling for the different communities, we had school time, we had weekends for the Tam Junction area, we had commute time. So we do have background data built into that, which will specifically be more applicable on the Zone Haven side. Mm-hmm. But especially if we go with that if this and that modeling that I'm talking about, then that's where it can really come into play.
Which is great. I think Jordan.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick that in terms of updating the tool, I want to clarify that if you're thinking about update of the underlying data, that's the benefit of having that data review report that is already published. We have clearly identified every source of data, and so we can clearly request a new update from the partner who's providing that data. Some of it is LiDAR, some of it is US Census, some of it is, whatnot. I think the key is the projects that are being implemented by our member agencies. That's the data that we really need to update as frequently efficiently as possible. And that will rely on our GIS consultant to help us with that piece of it. But everything else is essentially already on a schedule since we've identified all the sources and we know who they come from. It's up to that source of to provide new data. Of course, we can always, decide that this is not fast enough and invest into updating, but that's not on the table at the moment.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Catherine.
It's not exactly a question, but it's about the scenarios, the if this, then that scenarios. So there was an article in the IJ about finding an egress, evacuation, a second evacuation route for Marin City. And the suggestion was to go through Manzanita. Manzanita, I live so close to it, and on a king tide day and a rain event, it is a lake. And so the kinds of things that we need to do is, do we cut through the mountain? Do we go? I mean, some of these places that are considered to be evacuation routes are absolutely, at certain times of the year, impassable and impossible. So I really appreciate the fact that are we at that point where we can address that?
Absolutely. And that's also where the data is going to come in handy. The fire professionals have been saying for Marin City, as an example, get to 101, get to the shopping center, and you will be safe.
Oh, okay.
So creating the secondary means of egress from Marin City probably is not viable. It's in a bowl.
Yeah.
It's there. And what we've been telling people, that there are no magic roads. There are no magic tunnels. The roads that we have are the roads that we have. And so that's where identifying fire behavior, where it's going to be, and identifying temporary refuge areas. You get down to the bowl, the bottom of the Marin City bowl, you'll survive. And that's where the temporary refuge area is. And there's many, many areas like that in Marin where people want that magic road, but in reality, Sleepy Hollow is another great example of people being really concerned about getting out of Sleepy Hollow. Get on Butterfield. You will survive on Butterfield. And the data shows that.
It's interesting because I was just asked the other day if the fire road between Sleepy Hollow and Terra Linda would be open when there's a fire.
If they want to die, that would be a good place to go.
Yeah.
And I hate to be that blunt, but that's true.
Any more, Dennis?
Thanks, Mark. Excellent report. In talking about the training that you were embarking on, does that include DPW staffs and other people that
Absolutely.
use this tool? Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, we are really encouraging non-fire agencies to use this tool.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We knew that.
Spectacular product. Charlotte and STI, Spatial Informatics, High Regions Group, everybody has done, this is really spectacular. Dennis's question about communication and sharing of this data with the responsible agencies, fire, traffic, and communication. This seems like a huge undertaking. And I mean, the game plan for this you've got to calendarize this. You've got to, you have to have staff expertise. I'm assuming that this is going to be something that's done in partnership with Charlotte and team and Cinema Technology. But can you, do you have a game plan for communication? And if so, can you tell us the magnitude of it, the timing of it? And I mean, just let's just start there with that first question.
You want me to, or you got it, Charlotte?
I'll let you answer. I do want to preface that, we are asking you to recommend release of the tool to the public. That's not to say that we're asking you to encourage the public to come and use the tool. Our member agencies are already using the tool to communicate with the public. I've seen it many times, actually, just on random other occasions where all of a sudden Chief Weber gets a call from resident X and Y asking about their segment of road or their area, and he just pops in there and goes, well, actually, or yeah, you're right, and this is what we're doing about it. So the tool is already being used for the public's benefit and to communicate with the public. I think that I don't know that releasing the data and the tool is the same as inviting every member of the public to actually go on there and look at, it's not to say we wouldn't be okay with them doing that, but I hope that prefaces Mark's answer
And-
to your question a
And,
little bit.
and as far as our responsible agencies using it, the training is actually already started. And we sit down with myself, Charlotte, Tammy, and Brian, and we've done it with the TAT members. We've done it with the West Marin agencies with their planning already. And it's proven successful. It's relatively easy. People have gotten used to turning layers on and off. The trick to it that I've found is just actually to identify the layers that speak to you the most. And that's what's been the part that's been most successful for me. And we haven't recorded, actually we have recorded one of the sessions, but we do plan on recording the session that will be meant as a training session. And then we can engage in an ad hoc fashion with each of the member agencies. But we are presenting this product with training to the ops committee and advisory technical committee at the very beginning of the planning process. So in November.
Yeah, exactly. Just to add to that, this is exactly right. This is a planning tool, and therefore the process is use this tool to create better projects that are submitted to the work plan for your approval. The tool itself is not the end result. It's just a tool.
So what is the app actually called? What is the, is it
It's
called evacuation?
It's evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. Our end goal is that it will be on Marin Map. We already have a segment of Marin Map that's dedicated to the MWPA. Those layers will be on within there. That's after Marin Map transfers over to Esri. Until it's on, until they transfer over to Esri, it'll be on STI site that will be linked through our website. And again, it's a pretty easy product, and I think it's called GeoPlanner is the Esri product. that we're
Currently,
using.
it's GeoPlanner, yes. Mhm.
That's the name of the software. We just provide the data so that it's our risk assessment name.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple questions. I'm wondering if on the website we can have, when projects are being proposed, whether it meets the CWPP, whether it meets the one TAM forest health study, and whether it meets the evacuation risk assessment. And I think that would help provide transparency and validation that we are using the science to modify the projects as we go forward.
I really like that idea. Currently in our JPA portal for project planning, we have a yes, no, is this mentioned in the CWPP. We can easily add we should add the forest health and the ingress egress risk assessment if the data was used. It might be that people check all three.
Yes, yeah, the
And-
more the merrier.
Yes, and I love that question because I really would like to use this tool to track our strategic measures under this goal. So that would feed right under that, where we could say, this project contributes to lowering the risk based on the assessment that was made with the tool.
And then the phase 2 that you're contemplating, is that an additional amount of money that would be needed?
Yes, and that's why we're looking to partner with the NOAA grant. But if we're able to help the company that I'm talking about connect with Zone Haven, then it can be part of our Zone Haven package.
So do you have a range in mind? I don't want you to negotiate against yourself, but do you have a range in mind?
No, not yet.
Okay.
And if I may, Mark, just to clarify the phase, so we still have already approved expenditure budget for Sonoma Technology to act as consultant and help our member agencies in the first few iterations of them proposing projects, vetting them through the tool, modifying them, vetting them again, and finally proposing them for the work plan, right? So that budget's already sort of allocated and accepted. I think when Mark refers to phase 2, it's separate from that.
Beyond that.
And for the projects that are currently ongoing, like the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break or Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break or the
Summit
storage.
Ralston.
Sorry?
Or Summit Ralston or
Yeah.
Marin City
Yeah.
or.
I'm just wondering if someone Anne perhaps is looking at this report and looking at what was originally proposed and modifying the current work based on this report.
More of our member agency subject matter experts and is helping connect them to the product, and then they're using the product for that decision making.
Okay, great. I think it'd be helpful to kind of keep track of the modifications based on this study.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from the board, Bruce?
Um, the question of sharing this with the public, is the question, putting on a website that they can open up and just read it as is. That's it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
Yep.
And that's for the board to decide upon. I'm with Rachel and others. I think that an informed public makes informed decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm all for it. And the question about continuing the application, can you please clarify what the question was and what the implications are?
So we had thought about making a dynamic tool on our own, a standalone software.
Okay.
And that would be for planners to go in, say, if we make the vegetation clearing 50 feet versus 100 feet on this roadway, what is it going to do? If we do traffic control at this intersection, what is it going to do? And we feel that that's just, we won't get the return on investment that we think we could get out of it. We think would take far more money and effort, and we would have low return on that.
It's also because the planning cycle is fairly slow and subject to all sorts of regulations. So we would be developing a tool for a planner to go in there maybe once or twice a year to check on things. It just isn't, the use of it doesn't warrant a self-use application or software, especially for the audience that would be using it, essentially our member agencies, other planning stakeholders and so on. So
Okay, thanks. I guess I wasn't clear on what your recommendation was in that regard. And yeah, I'm just thrilled with this product, and I just want to congratulate the team again for the fantastic work. It's just state of the art work, and it's going to help us make, besides the science behind it, these algorithms or constructs that get us in the right quadrant. I think, right? It's not precision, but this is going to help us make informed decisions and make a difference. So I want to thank Charlotte and STI, Tammy, if you're still there, Mark and team for managing this thing. Way to go. Thank you so much.
I'm still here. Thank you.
Yeah.
This was a really groundbreaking project for me, and I'm very proud of the work.
Yeah, you should be. It's amazing. Rachel.
All right, question. Remind me again, who owns the product?
We do.
We do. Okay. So do we anticipate other jurisdictions? You had started earlier today talking about the need for other jurisdictions to do similar types of work that MWPA is doing. Do you anticipate other jurisdictions potentially asking for use of the product?
The product, there really is no product for them to use. It's process, and they would have to embark upon the same process that we went through.
But
Well,
the technology is there. So we funded to build the technology. I mean, it wouldn't be a bake sale, but I mean, it would be, if there's a way that if we own it, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm?
Yeah, I do. So if we had developed an app or a program, then we would own the technology. This is us going through data compilation, fire modeling, traffic modeling, and then putting all that data into Esri GeoPlanner. So we developed the process to acquire and assemble that data, but we don't have the technology is already publicly available, marketable technology.
sorry, Mark. So you're right. We have received though requests for data layers. And so perhaps this is something that the board should consider as, partner agencies' requests for specific output layers, such as the map of SB 99 roads. I think that what we've discussed is this is at the center of MWPA's mission, and evacuation is interdisciplinary. So we should be sharing this data with our partner agencies that can help working on evacuation. That's not to say that we would be allowing them to look under the hood at the model itself that Sonoma Technology's been producing. So there's different aspects, I think, of the question here.
And actually the fire modeling is open source fire modeling.
Yeah.
Which was a benefit for us. And not all of the data is ours. We were granted permission to use some of the data as ourselves.
And what about Belvedere and Tiburon? Do they have access to this information?
As a member of the public.
Okay.
But it does not represent Tiburon and Belvedere, that portion of the map that has no data on it.
I noticed that in the report. Okay. Bruce?
So I guess a question is, have you thought about putting together some key talking points in regards to this that you would share with the public? And to be thinking about those key messages?
That would be the executive summary that we're preparing for the public.
Okay, so you'll have that sometime soon.
Correct.
Okay.
We didn't embark upon that just pending the board's approval.
Yeah, I understand. The other thing that strikes me, this is kind of a question and comment, is that just as Mark and Ann, you're so deeply involved in interfacing with, with CAL FIRE, with state agencies, in the appropriate forums to share, who MWPA is, what our organization is, JPA, et cetera. I see this as just a rich product that indeed it would be a benefit to other partners. I don't want you to get eaten up by speaking here, there, and everywhere, but and I want you to certainly contain your time, but have you thought about those implications and the game plan for marketing this out for the benefit of WUI communities throughout the nation?
Yeah, we have. In fact, our standard PowerPoint presentation currently has one slide that talks about this product that we're developing, and that slide will obviously be replaced with a very broad overview of its results, depending on the audience.
All right. Let's take public comment on this item, Josh.
We have 2 hands raised for public comment. Stephen, I've allowed you to talk.
Thank you. As usual, fabulous product, and conversation that you all have had. I've learned a lot, both from Mark's presentation and the questions of the executive committee. I did have one question that I thought Dennis was going to cover, but he got close to it, but not quite. When he was talking about addressing other agencies, he mentioned DPWs. What about the police department? Since they are going to be responsible for largely traffic management, does your outreach include, and let me expand it a little bit more, Mark. I know you encourage all of the agencies that might possibly use it to pay attention to it, to think about how they can utilize it. But do you have a specific plan to make sure that none of them are overlooked and left out, whether it's going to the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council people to make sure they know about it, or is it any other campaign to make sure that nobody gets left out simply because they weren't paying attention or stepped up? But anyhow, again, congratulations to everybody on this.
That's actually a really easy one to respond to. In the development of the RFP, we met with the Marin County Department of Public Works directors. Their input was included in the RFP, and also we've already presented this product to the DPW directors. We also included law enforcement in the development of the RFP, and law enforcement and DPW were part of the technical advisory team. And then I have been asked to present to the Marin County Police Chiefs Association later this month. So between the good fire representation, meeting with law enforcement next or in 2 weeks, and our continued conversation with DPW. I think we've got and then we actually have already presented with and partnered with OEM. So I think we've got all those bases covered.
Josh, next comment.
Larry Minikis.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Mark, for an excellent presentation. And my remarks mirror Bruce's earlier remarks on just the excellence and appreciation for the work that's being done here. And I was sitting here listening to all this and thinking how far we've come as a community and the agency from the founding of Measure C. And it's just like, I kept thinking, wow, you know, the work that we've done to this point is impressive. We have a lot more work to do, but just this, getting this far, really pioneering, is just fantastic. And I'm just proud of it all to be a little part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else, Josh?
Yes, Kingston Cole.
Go ahead, Kingston.
Yeah, I'm not speaking as a member of the Citizen Oversight Committee. This is a personal question. What do you think the reaction is going to be of the insurance carriers, insurance industry, or have you already figured that out to when this tool goes public?
Excellent question. And what I've learned is, quite frankly, the insurance industry doesn't care about anyone else's data besides their own. They do not look at CAL FIRE's fire severity maps. They do not look at our risk assessment that we've published before. They have their own analytical tools. Proposition 103 requires that they cannot use cat risk modeling to set their rates, but they are using cat risk modeling to decide who they insure and who they not insure. And the reinsurance companies are already using cat risk modeling. So we're confident they're not going to use our data.
Okay, thank you.
And Rebecca Suggs.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Sorry, I had to push another unmute. Thanks. And Mark, one more question. Can you extrapolate information that you and Charlotte have presented and make it a YouTube video that can be used more broadly in communication with public? Thanks.
We definitely take a look at that, and that would probably be a little bit easier for the public to digest rather than an executive summary.
Yeah, maybe Fire Safe Marin can help you with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca.
Good idea. Is that it? Okay, so let's bring this back to the executive committee for final discussion. Perhaps we should focus first on the release to the public level of transparency. I think we have consensus on an executive summary and or a YouTube video. Any further thoughts on that, Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I think it's really necessary to be very, very transparent with anything we produce at MWPA. It is the public and the property owners that are paying for us to be here and do this work. So sharing everything is really important. Having said that, though, I think we also need to understand what the expectations of the public might be once they have this information, because we have a very strong group of people out there who have a huge interest in the work we're doing. And because it's such a complicated tool, easily could dive into something and don't understand it and want help understanding it. So I think being prepared as an agency and being prepared to prepare our partners that they may get a lot of outreach from the public about this tool, and be prepared for that, because I think it could be a huge interest. And so expecting that might be helpful. And again, as we present it to the public and the YouTube or whatever idea we use, that can be helpful. But I'm sure there are going to be people diving into this, looking at their neighborhood and wanting answers, wanting to better understand it. And I think just being prepared for that as we release it to the public.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. And I think we also need to be really careful to make sure that this is simply a planning tool and people should not be using it in, no pun intended, in the heat of the moment when they're trying to evacuate and figure out stuff. They need to take direction from Alert Marin and Zone Haven, et cetera. So maybe we need a footer or a caveat, something to remind people what the purpose of this is and don't misconstrue. And in the event of an evacuation, you take your signals from the appropriate agencies because the variables are going to be so different from everything that's anticipated.
We will build that in.
That was sort of my comment as well. It's like a WebMD caveat.
That's a good idea.
Check with your professional.
I'll refrain from WebMD stories.
Yeah. Any other further comments? All right. I think we need to have a motion to recommend that the Board of Directors accept the report and make the information available to the public with the appropriate caveats.
So moved.
Second.
Catherine moved and Rachel seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mark and Charlotte. Really well done. And Tammy.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And Tammy and Brian, thank you very much, guys. You rocked it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Item 8, Citizens Oversight Committee. A member of the Citizens Oversight Committee will present this item.
And the Citizens Oversight Committee reached out to me and said they have no significant updates or questions to ask, but I will let you know, as I mentioned already, the COC report's been published. And I will be preparing a staff report for the exec committee for next month for board acceptance on for the next board meeting in November. And they're not wasting any time, and they're already well engaged in starting for the next fiscal year report.
Wonderful. Number 9, Board of Directors agenda review for the October meeting. Mark.
Pretty straightforward. However, I do feel I missed an item, and that is an action item to accept the audit. Since we will be talking about the audit at the Finance Committee meeting, we'll need to add that item to the agenda.
Great. Public comment on this item, Josh?
If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand. We have no raised hands.
All right. Bringing the item back to the committee. Any discussion or feedback from anyone? No. Number 10, committee members' request for future agenda items. Bruce, yes.
Yeah, I just want to go on record that we had this discussion during the executive officer's report. I request more ping the county and ask the county staff to come and give a presentation on the H Ranch prescribed fire project, including the implications and applicability to our work and MWPA's work.
And I would recommend adding the Ridgecrest or the Rock Springs project to it as well.
Yeah, in your you're much more aware of what's going on, Mark. So yeah,
you bet.
I just think it's time to really shine on this.
Thank you.
Number 11, closed session. I will take public comment on the closed session item.
If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand. We have no raised hands.
All right, I will now close public comment and the committee will adjourn to the closed session conference with legal counsel as referenced on the agenda. Are we moving locations?